and in a town as small as mine, that's a pretty sizable number. For a criminal, though, it only made sense to bury them there. Again, this place was basically abandoned and totally secluded. Really, the only other people that far northwest of town were the wagees at the pass and go, and they weren't getting paid enough to be on the lookout for anything. Not to mention, they had their own weirdness to deal with. All sorts of strange and illegal activities happened in that pothole-ridden parking lot, and why wouldn't it? That place was the last beacon of humanity's presence in the town for miles, until you got to 90th Street, the main road shooting off from the highway. So, anybody working there had enough going on at their own doorstep and wouldn't be paying any attention to cars pulled off on the side of the road with mysteriously heavy duffel bags in the trunk. Suffice it to say, once the position opened, I was the only person in town out of options enough to drop off an application. And wouldn't you know it, I was scheduled to start 2 days later. The job was easy, and though at first I was shadowing a guy that by all accounts could have been undead, I was left to my own devices a week later. To be honest, I actually kind of liked the job at first. 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. were pretty standard hours of consciousness for me anyway, and working the graveyard shift finally gave me an excuse to sleep in until 3. It was dead most nights. Sometimes, and I'm not exaggerating, I literally didn't see a single customer. And other nights, the goofiness of my interactions with various druggies kept things interesting. But those kinds of nights aren't what this story is about. The first time I remember being pretty confused was only 2 weeks after I'd started the job. I was pretty stoned at the time, so I tensed up when I saw a cop walking toward the door, but I wasn't complacent enough to blaze it before work without eye drops, for fear of these exact situations. Not so much worried about getting arrested, but about what my dad would do to me. I also had a little bit of a heads up in the form of a faulty open sign in the window. The neon would pretty often flicker or dim for some reason when people were coming up to the door. Really couldn't tell you why it happened. But when I was totally fucking off behind the counter, it was my cue to act natural for a minute. And since a bunch of random bullshit was stacked up on the side of the counter to my left facing the parking lot and the pumps, I couldn't ever see out the windows unless I was actively looking over it. So, needless to say, whatever was wrong with that sign certainly wasn't something I was going to try and get fixed. When the cop walked in, I sort of leaned back as casually as possible and tried to make small talk with him so his mind wouldn't wander anywhere else.